Françaises, Français,
French
mes chers
citizens,
compatriotes,
fellow compatriots,
nous sommes en train de vivre des jours difficiles.
the times we're living through
Nous
are
ressentons
hard
tous en ce
times.
moment la peur, l'angoisse,
We feel, all of us, fear, much concern for ourselves and for our parents and loved ones,
redoutable, invisible,
facing up to this virus which is an invisible enemy.
et la lassitude pour certains,
Fatigue
le deuil et le
for
chagrin
some,
pour d'autres.
sorrow and great sadness for others.
Est encore plus difficile à vivre lorsque
This is a time which is even more harder
appartements
to live through when we are living in small, confined quarters, numerous people living under the one roof, when we have to find new ways to learn, to communicate, to live, because the conditions that we are currently living in are tough conditions, when we risk further violence in our own homes. This creates fear, and we can only feel how much loneliness and sadness all of us can feel, especially the elderly. And yet, thanks to all of our efforts, we have made progress. Our public servants, medical staff, our paramedics, first aid providers, our pharmacy operators, all of our firemen and women are working tirelessly to save lives and to heal. French hospitals have been able to take in and provide care for all of those who came in through their doors. These times are much to the honor of our medical staff. On the second line of our battle, we have all of the delivery staff, people who are working in the agricultural industry, people working at checkouts, people working to clean the streets for security, our civil servants, journalists, social workers, mayors. And this is just to name but a few of them. The list goes on and on. All of these French men and women have answered the call and have enabled our nation to continue to operate. And deep down, it is each and every one of you. Each and every one of you as part of that third line, because you act civically minded, because you respect the rules that we have laid down, because you listen to and abide by the rules that are enforced by our policemen and our gendarmerie. Because of you, we're seeing the results of our efforts. A number of regions have actually been spared of the virus. We have seen that those people entering resuscitation wards, the numbers are dropping. So tonight, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart. So were we prepared for this crisis? Well, I think we have to say that no, we weren't. But we have to admit to our errors. But we, as in France, as in elsewhere around the world, we have been able to make hard decisions, to deal with partial information, changing information, to try and deal with the virus, because this is an unknown virus. And even today, there are still many questions that remain unanswered. Because of the current time we're going through, we have seen failings in our system, insufficiencies. We didn't have enough operating gowns, we didn't have enough antiseptic gel, we didn't have enough masks for our medical staff, for those people looking after the elderly, for those people who were providing home assistance. And the second we identified those issues, we enacted as what individuals, as wholes, as representatives of the major industry, to try and provide the essential material for these people. But when you are on the front line, it is so often hard to hear this clear message that there just isn't enough in the world. So we put in orders, and our French companies, our French workers, answered the call, and they started producing. Just as we would do in a time of warm, we put in place production lines. We requisitioned a number of companies, and just in a few weeks, imagine it, we've been able to increase the production of masks by 5-fold. And we will have 10,000 more ventilators on our French soil. These ventilators are so essential for our resuscitation wards, and because of all of our effort, we will be able to deal with this crisis, and we will continue to send out more equipment where it's needed. But as you, I have seen mistakes being made. Things take far too long, unnecessary red tape, procedural matters, logistics failings. And we will learn from this. When the time comes, we will learn from this. For the past few weeks, we have also seen some great successes. We have seen the number of beds in resuscitation wards double. We have seen cooperation, unheard of cooperation between medical centres, between hospitals, between private medical facilities. We've seen patients being sent out from the most affected regions to those less affected regions, across borders to Luxembourg, to Switzerland, to Germany and Austria, and I would like to thank them for it. We've also seen homeschooling being expanded throughout our nation. We have seen forms of new solidarity rise up. And we can see the fact that we have so many people, French citizens, who were spread out around the world, providing support. And we will still provide support to those French people living abroad. But far too often, what we thought was going to be impossible became possible in just a few days. We were able to innovate, we dared, and we acted. Those people in the field, they were able to find solutions. And we must remember that, because it is all of this strength that we have been able to tap into, and it is strength that we can utilize in the future. So I would like to now speak to you. I would like to speak to you all, because I need to tell you in full transparency what we expect to see in the coming weeks and months. Yes, there is hope, but nothing is yet won in this battle. In the far east regions of France, as in the centre of France, the hospital services are overburdened. Everywhere in France, metropolitan France, and across in our overseas territories, we can see that the system is on a very tight line. The epidemic is still there and is still not under control. We need to continue to put in all of our effort to try and stem the spread of this virus, because the more we do that, the more we will be able to save lives. This is why we need to have the utmost respect of the lockdown rules up until the 11th of May. During this time, the only way we will be able to have any form of impact on the virus is by respecting these lockdown laws. This is a way of stemming the spread. This means that we will be able to find new beds in resuscitation wards, and it will also be able to give a chance to our medical staff to be able to gather their strength. The Monday, 11th of May, will be a day where up until then, we will have to be able to continue to act civically, because in doing so, we will be able to stop the spread of the virus. I take full measure of the effort that I'm asking of you. In the 4 weeks that lie ahead of us, the rules that were outlined by the government will continue to be enforced. We can already see the effectiveness of these rules, and we will not strengthen them nor loosen them, but we will continue to enforce them as they currently stand. I call on all of our elected officials, as is outlined by the rules of our republic, to continue to provide assistance in enforcing these rules. Curfews have been put in place in some areas, but it's only where it has been deemed useful. But we do not need to add any further barriers on our citizens. We also need to ensure that people need to continue avoiding unnecessary contact with others. I want to call on all those people who are suffering from chronic disease, or those people who are continuing to suffer from other diseases, to continue to see their doctors. Because on top of the virus, other things kill. Isolation. Giving up on our social glue that keeps us together, that is another form of suffering. I want to call on those people working in hospitals and in retirement homes to try and organize visits for those people who are in the end of their life in palliative care, to ensure that people can say their farewells when necessary. And in this time of lockdown, our country will continue to live. Granted, some activities are not allowed to go ahead, but that is because they go against the general understanding of the rules of lockdown, and they aren't essential to the economy. But there are other areas of the economy which will continue to operate, and they will continue to produce. There will be manufacturing that will continue to go ahead because it is needed, as it has been over the past few weeks. For all those who need help in this time, there will be partial unemployment benefits for employees and partial financial assistance for companies, which will be extended and increased. These mechanisms have not been seen before on our soil. We already have some 8 million employees and companies who are already tapping into these additional financial benefits. For small business owners, for freelance workers, for people who are self-employed, there are solidarity funds which have been put in place to ensure that you can still survive. And this is why I've called on the government to increase this form of aid, to enable and to easy up the access to these sorts of fundings, so that people can really ensure that they will be able to continue forward. And we will ensure that any form of financial insurance necessary will be in place for these people. And I call on all of your support to be able to pull us through the tough economic times that lie ahead. A very specific plan for tourism, the hotel industry, for the restaurant industry, a specific plan for these industries, for the culture and for the events industry will be put in place to ensure the future of these industries, for the most vulnerable of our country. The coming weeks are going to be the hardest. I would like to make special mention of the mayors and all of the grassroots organizations who have been doing so much with the government over these past few weeks, and actually called on the government to even do more in this vein. For the most impoverished families with children, we will provide them with additional benefits so that they can provide for their most essential basic needs. For those students, for those people living in difficult situations or living far from their family or overseas, they will also be assisted. As of this very Wednesday, we will decide in our cabinet meeting on further measures, and the government will continue to provide measures and assistance where needed. The 11th of May, fellow citizens, is a date which will mark a new era. The steps following the 11th of May will be a progressive measure that we will have to put in place, because it will always be by taking into account the results of all of the measures that we've put in place so far, because we need to ensure the health of all of the French citizens. We will open up, bit by bit, the daycare centres, primary schools, secondary schools, as of the 11th of May. Because for me it is a priority that we get back to a situation where we avoid further inequality. Because there are far too students who don't have access to schools because they don't have access to digital tools. There are so many students out there who don't have help from their own parents. And it is in times like this where inequalities, the gaps in our society, are widened. And this is why our students need to be able to go back to school. And the government will be consulted to put in place specific rules and regulations for specific situations to be able to ensure that our teachers and our students will be protected. For those in tertiary education, classes will not start again in physical classrooms until the coming summer. So the government will ensure that everything will be done to hold exams. The 11th of May will also be an opportunity for French citizens to go back to work for major industry. Our government will start planning, again with working with industrial relations representatives, to ensure that this back-to-work period will be done by protecting the health and safety of our employees. Certain major gathering areas, cinemas, theatres, events, concert halls, restaurants, bars, will not open. Major festivals and events with large crowds will not be able to be held, at least up until mid-July. The situation will be looked at again. As of mid-May, we will look at the future and take stock of the situation to see what the future will hold for those areas of the country. Again, we call on those people, the most vulnerable, those people suffering from disabilities with chronic disease. We call on you, the most vulnerable, to please stay at home even after the 11th of May, to protect yourselves. I understand the extent of what I'm asking of you. But we will try and do as much as possible in the time up until then and after then to make this as bearable for you as possible. But you do have to try and do this for your own health and for your own safety. As of the 11th of May, we will be working in a new form of organization. We will have as widespread use of tests and diagnostics materials that will be used to truly make the most of this lockdown period. We will scale up the number of tests in the coming weeks. And this is what we've seen over the past few days and weeks has already brought about good effects and results. We want these tests to be carried out first and foremost on the elderly, on the most vulnerable, and then we'll continue to put out all forms of testing throughout France, using all forms of laboratories, all forms of clinical workers to ensure that these tests are carried out so that we can test absolutely every person who has symptoms. Now, we're not going to test all French men and women because that would make no sense. Anyone who has symptoms will be tested. Those people with the virus will be able to be then quarantined. They will be able to have medical care and have a medical profession follow their case. For this stage, we've already been working with a number of our European partners. We have a smartphone app, a volunteering-based, it's an opt-in application, which we'll be able to use so that we can be in contact with the contaminated persons. You've obviously heard about this in the media. The French government will work on this because we need to look at all forms of innovation. But I want for that before the 11th of May, our parliaments and governments and authorities will be able to debate it and analyze it. Because this epidemic should not affect our liberties, our fundamental liberties, our democracy. Until future orders come in, our borders will remain closed. Then we will roll out all forms of resources to ensure that we can protect our population, our citizens. Obviously, in addition to all of the gestures that we are calling you to do, to wash your hands, to cough into your elbow, for example, we will ensure that there will be more than that, so that as of the 11th of May, with working hours, every French man and woman will be able to get a mask. And it's so essential for those people working in those jobs where they're most exposed. They will have to be able to have access to a mask. And because we are importing masks, but also because within our own borders, with all of our own industry, companies and employers alike are mass producing these masks. In the coming 2 weeks, the government will come up with a plan for the post-lockdown period, for the post-11 May. There will be regular meeting points where we will meet together to be able to adapt the measures that we will implement. And together we will be able to decide how to adjust the measures when necessary. So then what is the timeline ahead of us? Maybe we will see the end of the tunnel when we will be able to get back to a sense of normalcy. These are questions that I have, and I'm sure you have them as well. And they are well-founded questions. And I want to be able to give you a clear answer for each and every one of those questions, but to be perfectly honest with you, we have no clear-cut answer. Given the current data that we have, which is not perfect data because we still have a number of additional data to have, a small number of French men and women have actually contracted the virus, which means that we are so far from what the specialists call being what they call herd immunity, that point where the virus will stop spreading of its own accord because a sufficient number of us will have already contracted it. And this is why the first way out of this epidemic is through vaccines, immunization. And everyone around the world, researchers, are working on coming up with a vaccine. In France, we are already putting our resources to it. And this is because we have to ensure that the science is sound and the tests are sound as well before we roll it out en masse. And we will continue to invest more in research. In the coming days, I will launch an initiative with a number of our European partners on your behalf to ramp up research into a virus immunization. The other way out is for us to be able to roll out that treatment wide scale. I wanted all of us, all of our government, to look into each of the different ways out of this possible so that we could try and trial everything as best as possible. Now, I'm not talking about coming up with a treatment if we aren't sure of the treatment. We need to ensure that all of the clinical trials necessary have been carried out for an effective treatment and a safe treatment to be rolled out. And all of our medical staff, our doctors, are working tirelessly to look into every possible treatment. And this is my solemn commitment to you. We will look at every possible treatment. This is what I have to say with you. This is what we know and this is what we don't know. We will prevail. But in the meantime, we will have to continue to live with the virus by our sides. So in all humbleness, we have to decide now what we're doing, and sometimes we have to decide in face of great uncertainty. But yes, when we look at Asia, it seems that they had overcome the virus, yet it came back in full strength, and they have to close down their economies once again. So therefore, we need to decide with a clear, calm mind, and we need to do so bravely. But what I do know is that our country is still standing, and we stand united with a common goal. People have said that we are an unruly nation, but here we are, and we have respected the most strict set of rules that we have ever enforced on our own people. People say that we are a country without foundations, but here we are a country that is willing to break down its daily routine, to change the way we live, to be able to stand up against this threat. Here we stand united. We stand together. We are citizens of one country, a country that stands up against the threat. This is a country that loves debate, to discuss it, and we continue to live our form of democracy to the absolute fullest. But we stand united. And that is why I want to say how proud I am of you. Because this is a notion of France, an idea of France that gives us hope. And what gives us hope is us French men and women, the government and the parliament, our French administration with all of our mayors, local electives, will be preparing the future. For me, I will carry the French voice forward to the European scene to ensure that what is done will be done in common sense. And we have already pushed for a number of measures to be brought in. The European Commission, the European Central Bank have already brought in measures. But this is a time of truth, which calls for us to be more daring in what we do for the future, in shaping the future. We need to be there to provide assistance to people in Africa to deal with the virus as effectively as possible, to help them also from economic terms by annulling their debt. Because yes, we will never prevail if we stand alone. In Bergamo, Madrid, Brussels, London, Beijing, Dakar, everywhere in the world, we see people mourning the deaths that have come about because of the same virus. And if our world begins to break apart, then we need to try and pull it together and stand united. In the coming weeks, we'll have to start preparing for the after period. We will have to build up an economy that is even stronger than before, that will have enough to give hope to all of our companies and employees for the future. We will have to rebuild a sense of agricultural independence. Independence in terms of our health industry, our economy, all forms of solidarity for our economy. And we also need to do it at the European level. We will also have to recall a number of points.
tient tout entier.
Our country stands united
Des femmes
today,
et des hommes
and we stand united
que nous
because
connaissent
we have men
si mal.
and women who are working but are so underpaid.
Les distinctions sociales ne peuvent être fondées que sur l'utilité commune.
One's social utility should only be determined
Les Français les ont
according
dit il y a plus
to how useful they are to the whole.
Nous devons aujourd'hui reprendre le flambeau.
These are words that were written in France some 200 years ago, and this is a message that we need to reignite today.
Il faudra bâtir
It needs to be our driving force.
stratégie où nous retrouverons le
We
temps
need to
long.
come up with a strategy that will carry us many years on into the future.
La sobriété carbone, la prévention,
We need to focus on carbon,
qui seules peuvent
sensibility,
permettre de faire face aux crises
on resilience, on preventive measures.
s'imposent aujourd'hui.
We need to plan for the future because there will be future crises.
Et je reviendrai
And
donc
while I may say this today and it seems perfectly logical to you, I'm saying it because these are our driving principles for the after-COVID period.
est un ébranlement
The current time we're going through
collectif.
is shaking the very foundations of our society.
Il nous rappelle que
It
nous
is
sommes
affecting all of us.
vulnérables. Nous l'avions sans doute oublié.
But this has been a stark reminder of how vulnerable we are.
À y trouver la confirmation
But I don't think we need to look into this time as trying to find the confirmation of long-held beliefs. It's a time where we need to go off the beaten track. We need to move beyond ideology.
moi le premier.
And I will do that. I will hold myself to that. Because in this crisis, there is a chance, an opportunity for us to reunite with each other, to build a new future, one based on agreement,
Projet français, une raison
a future
de vivre ensemble.
where we have a French product where we can live together.
Dans les prochaines semaines, avec toutes les composantes de notre
In the
nation,
coming
je
weeks,
tâcherai de
with
dessiner
all
ce
of
chemin.
the parts to our government, I will do my utmost to ensure that this future will
Mes
be
chers
possible.
compatriotes, nous aurons des jours
Fellow
meilleurs,
citizens, we will see better days
des
ahead,
jours heureux. J'en ai la
and
conviction.
we will see more joyous
Et les
days
vertus
ahead.
qui aujourd'hui
I'm convinced of it.
nous permettent de tenir.
And because of what we are doing today, we are able to stand on our own 2 feet.
Notre solidarité, notre confiance.
But solidarity, trust, and willingness, these are the principles for our future. So take care of yourselves, take care of each other,
Nous tiendrons.
and we will prevail.
Vive la République.
Long live the French
Vive la
Republic.
France.
Long live France.